Good afternoon and welcome, students, faculty, board members, honored guests, to the first George Washington Speaker Series. This is a series that has been initiated this year to honor, to recognize, and especially to bring to Washington College outstanding leaders in a variety of fields, not only from the United States, but from around the world. And we are extraordinarily fortunate this afternoon to have with us one of the world's most prominent international bankers. These days, there aren't a whole lot of popular bankers in the world. There are even fewer who run banks that are so successful and solvent as Doha Bank. But under the extraordinary leadership of Mr. Seetharaman, Doha Bank has gone from strength to strength. He joined the bank in 2002 and almost immediately increased its market share from 4% to 25%. That alone would have been enough to ensure him an honored place at a high table. But not only in terms of improving profitability, he has also tried to set a standard, a model, for international banking, not just in Qatar, but also throughout the Persian Gulf and the rest of the world in terms of transparency, accountability, and particularly in the empowerment of women through loans, particularly to women and women's institutions. He is also something of an unusual banker, at least in the terms and the sense that we understand it. He is a devout Hindu and fitness enthusiast who practices yoga daily. As you will soon see, he is also widely known for wearing a tuxedo to work every single day and has a 25-year supply of bow ties, I learned earlier today. We did a quick investigation of the gift shop to see if we had a Washington College bow tie. We couldn't find one, but rest assured, one will soon be on its way to you to add to your collection. We are extraordinarily pleased that he has taken time from some very important meetings that he is having in Washington, D.C. Today and tomorrow with leaders of international financial institutions, including the United Nations and the World Bank. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Seetharaman, who will talk about the New World Order and opportunities, bilateral trade, investment, banking, and finance between the Gulf and the United States.
Thank you, President Rice, for the very generous remarks. It's my pleasure and privilege to be part of this interesting and exciting faculty and the students. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a changing world. The change is on account of globalization. The change is on account of the re-regulation. From deregulation, it has moved to re-regulation. The change is on account of the technology. Change is also on account of the consumerism. The financial economies are converting as real. Real economies are redefining the scope and performance. Conceptually, we live in a new world order. There are changing market dynamics, changing business trends in market acquisitions. Regulators are redefining the space. 24/7 back-end processing, cost reductions. Conceptually, changing business trends and technology trends is also realigning the business model. The crisis we have seen, we are witnessing, we are going to witness for a while, unless we recognize there are universal standards set in for accounting, valuation, securitization. The global governance needs to be redefined. That's the world we are in. The investment banks who took the housing mortgage loans and bundled into a debt package resulted in subprime. It was a product financially engineered It was all right as long as asset price inflation was on. When the asset price deflation started, when the housing market slump started, you have different stories. It has infected not only the United States, it transcended borders, transatlantic, again, Europe or even emerging markets were all infected. The auditors have failed. The rating agencies have failed. Regulators of light switch regulations have failed. Today, we are redefining the space. Conceptually, it is not few institutions. It's not Lehman Brothers or Bear Stearns which was setting the change in the new world order. Go to any part of the world. Clearly, we had instances in Europe, Northern Rock, Royal Bank of Scotland, again, emerging markets, some of the institutions which were all practicing asset-based securitizations all paid a big penalty for it. Now, we have come to terms. This world has to be redefined. That's why politics and economics started converging. G7 has become G8, G8 become G20. Setting new vision, setting universal standard in terms of global governance was a necessity. That's the world we are in. Clearly, the governing evidence for us is to see what sort of realignment and partnership can evolve so that long-term it produces gross welfare to the mass. The global growth is impaired. The financial crisis has given us an enormous amount of new lessons. What has changed in the last 3 years? Printing money, quantitative easing was supplementing additional advantage in terms of liquidity. The financial market started getting into, again, artificial support. The world has not recovered. The world is not still getting the financial stability as we deem fit, because the decisions which we have taken in G20, as I said, in terms of accounting or valuation or securitization, needs to be executed. It means politics and economics have to converge. Look at the recent reports of the IMF. The global growth, which was set in as not less than 4 to 5% in October, has been redefined. In January, it is likely to be between 3 to 4%. In the United States, we are getting some positive signals. Housing market is slowly recovering. Unemployment last quarter was 8.3%, which is a positive development. And again, consumer spending is improving. Clearly, there are governing evidence that things are improving in the United States. But the gross debt to GDP, you have to look at it. The countries and continents who have lived beyond their means have to pay for it. The conversion has to take place. S&P has downgraded the United States last year. The reflection we have seen today, the deficit financing, as well as the overall reduction in the overall gross debt, is going to be a major, major convergence between politics and economics. There are stagnations in the overall policy framework. Go to the Europe. There's an absolute deformity in the birth. There's a design error in terms of euro as a currency. You have monetary policy, which is centralized. Fiscal policy is not centralized. The reflection you have seen, the enlarged euro, is a failure. Whether euro as a currency can survive, EU as a one fraternity can survive, the questions are not answered. It cannot hold together in my pursuit of profession. Clearly, there are governing evidence. You have seen the struggle. There's an absolute contagion impact. Greece has lived beyond their capacity. They have to convert into real. It means it has to go to austerity measures. Spain, Portugal, Italy. The list is endless. This has got a profound impact in terms of overall value creations. You cannot sustain growth without value creations. Austerity can add value in terms of fiscal prudence. Clearly, you have to yearn to make sure you pay what you have overspent. That's the change we are seeing in Europe. Again, we live in an interconnected world. It is not going to go out of the overall value chain. The United States has to worry about what's happening in Europe. Go to the emerging markets. China China has lost 30 years, not less than 39% average. Again, asset bubbles. You have clearly housing market is in bubble. There's a possibility of stagflation there. India is also, again, fiscal consolidation is an issue. Inflation is eating the overall growth momentum. This is the world we are in. If you look at the overall, the indicators, advanced economies are grossly underperforming. In a way, they are in contraction. Incremental growth, 50 to 60%, is coming out of the emerging markets and developed economies. We need to evolve a partnership, create a business model which can sustain global growth, global financial stability. That's the partnership we are talking about. That's the new world order we are talking about. How do we create it? Look at the Gulf states. The Gulf states, the 6 countries put together, namely Oman, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. 6 states put together, $1 trillion block. It runs in fiscal surplus, current account surplus, investable surplus. The GDP, if you look at the IMF estimates, is not less than 1.6 trillion, taking oil at $80. Conceptually, the current account surplus to GDP is over 20%. Fiscal surplus is not less than 12%. That's the kind of value creations we are talking about. In spite of the macroeconomic stability, they are not isolated from the global crisis. Insulated in terms of macroeconomic stability, but they are not isolated from the global financial crisis. It is infecting the real economies. The real economies have to redefine their scope. They have to redefine their business model to make sure there is financial stability comes in. Communism has changed. Capitalism is alterating its form and substance. Mixed economies are performing. Clearly, we need to evolve that partnership. We need to redefine the overall alignment in terms of the political frame and constitutional order to make sure the gross welfare come to terms. That's what the change we are talking about. Look at the changes which has come in the regulatory framework. Security Exchange Commission couldn't deduct the investment banks through light switch supervision. Clearly, financial engineering has breached the framework, and corporate governance in real response has been defeated. That's why you have Paul Walker's rules. That's why proprietary trading, investments as a functional responsibility of financial institutions has been redefined. We have changes which are taking place both in the lending side as well as investment side to make sure you have ethical and moral governance comes in. Asset-backed securitization was a dictum, but asset-based securitization was practiced. That's why you had subprimes. Even so-called Islamic banking, Sharia-based finance, which was governed by asset-backed securitization rather, was defeated because people, in terms of principle-centered Sharia, practiced asset-based. Islamic sukuks were issued as asset-based securitization. That's why Islamic banking, to a large extent, failed as well. Again, as a moral and ethical framework, Sharia governance principles are well-founded. I always say it's being practiced through your heart in addition to your head. Conceptually, we have to come to terms when it comes to practicing financial services. The change we have seen in the global map, again, regulators are redefining in universal standards. That's why the principle-centered liquidity risk has become funding risk, essentially ended up in sovereign risk. Countries are now withering away their basic framework, and they are coming to terms to sit in whether it is a bank's failure or is a sovereign failure. That's the level of reflection we are seeing in fragile world today. Look at the Gulf states. Gulf states, as I said, it's got very strong fundamentals. In 2008, when the world was visibly shaking up the world, in real order, the public-private partnership model was evolving. The government, in place like Qatar, has contributed 15 to 20% in the investment of the financial institutions. When the stock market was reflecting almost 40% down, way back in 2009 March, because the hedge fund holders, the market is liberalized, the hedge fund holders who came to the local market, disinvested, and they were running away. Result, in spite of good price-earning multiples, good price-to-book value ratios, the market was deflecting 40%. The government came with suggestions to buy back all the listed investments. And we saw the financial stability thereafter. Similarly, real estate sector, we had a major downturn. Major downturn. Distressed assets were bought by the government. Again, model of public-private partnership. The reason why I'm saying this is the new world order giving you new business alignment between the public and the private. Whether you run a private institution as a bank or a local institution as a bank, today it's global, it is public at large. Conceptually, that's the change we are seeing. In the midst of all, one country which we need to recognize is Qatar. Qatar is a jewel in the crown. When it comes to political progressions, they have done extraordinary visionary leadership. Whether it's Darfur or Lebanon or today Libya, they have resolved the political framework to suitable acceptance. When it comes to economic sustenance, last 14 consecutive years, the country is running in fiscal surplus, current account surplus. Qatar went to international market 15 years before. They didn't put flyovers or bridges or aerodromes. They realized, having got conserved resources in terms of natural gas, they got into industrial expansions. And again, the result is there for everyone to see. Today, the country is running in huge current account surplus. Last year, it is 36% of the GDP is a current account surplus. Sovereign funds, asset under management, is almost $185 billion. That's the scale at which they amassed the investable surplus. When it comes to social progression, Qatar as a country has certain principle-centered leadership. Education, world-class institutions like Cornell, Texas A&M, Virginia Common, some of the Americans, Georgetown, they're all housed in Qatar Foundation. Education, healthcare, they have showed clear character and governance to make sure social progression is equally important for you to sustain long-term values in terms of the overall governance. Conceptually, Qatar is a telling story. However small it is as a country, the country has got the total area, if you look at it, it's only 11,943 square kilometers. But it managed to maintain its discipline as a good governance, good transparency, and making sure there is an absolute principle-centered administration comes in. That's an opportunity for us to realize. Irrespective of the scale of your operations, you can, with your long-term vision, you can sustain credibility in terms of public acceptance. When the world was visibly, compelling for us to redefine the scope and performance, Qatar came to public-private partnership model. Today, in spite of the fact there was social unrest here and there, Qatar was stable and managed to maintain good social order. In terms of economic progression, it is performing as an exceptional governance. As I said, 10 to 12 years consecutive fiscal and current account surplus, we have also managed to get in 2022 World Cup, a small country which was competing with nations like United States. United States, in fact, is the right partner for Qatar. The Policy Institute of RAND is housed in Qatar. And clearly, in terms of governance, they have a say. U.S. plays a big role in the Gulf. If you look at the defense and military cooperations, the individual states' sovereigns are rightly protected, insured in a way, through U.S. administration. It's a very strong partnership. In addition to defense and military cooperations, there are evolving partnerships. Place like Qatar, you have world-class corporate like Chevron, ExxonMobil, Conoco, Oxy. American institutions are there. In terms of trade, if you look at the Gulf states and the United States, it's over $100 billion. In the coming days, it's going to go up. The Gulf states today is modernizing their framework. They have huge industrial expansion, infrastructure creations. The projects which have been pronounced is over $1.2 trillion. healthcare, education. It's a bigger opportunity. Who else can transfer knowledge than the United States? Qatar itself has got projects over 230 billion. In terms of non-hydrocarbon, it is going to grow in the next 5 years in aggregate terms not less than 9%. That's the scale at which we are seeing the opportunity. US can set in right kind of partnerships. It's evolving. We can add, clearly, the partnership in terms of trade, in terms of finance. And when it comes to finance, the transfer of knowledge is possible in terms of asset management. Again, social security. Again, fund management. When it comes to the investment options, there could be multiple collaborations can come in from the United States. The Gulf states as a whole is going to perform not less than 5 to 6%. Qatar, in the next 5 years, essentially, it's going to do not less than 9 to 10%. Hydrocarbon will be 9 to 10%. The industrial expansion in terms of hydrocarbon will be between 5 to 6%. It is going to run in projects worth of 230 billion. The opportunity is there for us to find a combinations, investment partnership, joint ventures for us to see through. This combination is going to work for the larger interest of everyone. That's the market we are talking about. US, as a country, has got very strong fundamentals. It's a $13 trillion economy. Today, with all the global distress conditions, still, if you look at US dollar as a currency, it's a safe haven. Throughout the crisis between 2008 to 2011, we have seen the rest of the currencies were fluctuating, and dollar index was strengthening. Even though between 2010 to 2011, between September 2010 to March 2011, it was dwindling a bit, but currency, dollar as a safe haven, is strengthening. US Treasury, people still funding. Euro, with the distress conditions, is weakening. The current opportunity for us to see through in the financial markets are very many. By bringing a partnership between US and the Gulf states in terms of investment partnership or joint ventures or industrial setup, by establishing a proper base in the Gulf states where you have tax-free zones, and again, clearly, cost of capital is cheaper, cost-effective labor is there, US companies can prosper, and they can produce and supply to emerging markets, developing world. That's an opportunity. Today's world, if you look at the currency market, these are all manipulated. US as a currency is stable and functional. This century, in my opinion, will hold US further. In addition to defense strength, US dollar is a currency to stay, not euro, not rest of the currencies. Clearly, in the next 10 years, you have a GDP to grow not less than 30 trillion. US as $13 trillion economy has strength to go not less than 18 trillion. But it has got its own nuances in terms of political stagnations. It has to resolve this. But there are opportunities in the changing world. That opportunity is in front of us by bringing a partnership between the Gulf states and the United States, so that developing world can be supported by using the middle ground as Middle East, with the Gulf states. That's the opportunity I'm talking about in terms of trade, investment, banking, and finance. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Seetharaman, for, given the current environment, was actually a rather optimistic outlook on growth in the United States and the opportunities for business development between the United States and the Gulf states. He'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Just be sure to identify yourself and to speak loudly so everybody in the audience can hear.
I guess I'd like to ask the Iran question.
Say who you are.
My name is Leslie Buck. I'm a retired businessman. I was in the investment and insurance business for 35 years. I live locally. I guess I'd like to ask the Iran question from the, point of view of an international banker. I guess you talk in terms of risk assessment. And, I don't know how Qatar views the likelihood of real military conflict between Iran and whether it's Israel or the United States in the next 12 months, whether you see that as more likely than not, less likely than not, and how do you think about that as an international bank?
See, the region itself is a flashpoint, as always. See, 40 to 45% of the world oil, 20-25% of the world gas comes from the region as such. Iran was always a flashpoint. And the way the individual sovereign states, whether it is Qatar or rest of the Gulf states, they've aligned with United States for defense and military. They cannot operate without United States. The central command for Army is in Qatar. The naval base is in Bahrain. Today, they are ensuring the individual sovereignty, and they are also giving total stability to the region. Whether Iran or Syria, again, it's going to be, a bigger difficulty for everyone to settle the score in Syria. But today, in terms of political governance, US leadership is given. Especially the principle-centered administration, which the US is performing, is a must. To protect the sovereign values of Saudi Arabia, you need United States. So the relationship is strengthening, in my opinion. And some of the regimes which needs transformation and social empowerment, whether it is Iran or Syria, has to change. The change will happen, whether by military or otherwise. US is an absolute leader to drive through. But I'm sure this time there will be a package. In Iraq, the expenditure was more. It drained the resources of the United States. I think the rest of the deals will come with a price. As a price worth paying by the Gulf states because they ensure overall stability in the region. Am I right, Mr. Leslie?
So it's a tough one.
I think.
Would you care to say whether you think the chance for war is?
I don't see it.
More than 50% or less than 50%?
As I said, it was always a flashpoint, Iran. I don't see a war. They will settle the score. See, today's world, people empowerment. Everything is people-centric. You have Twitter, Facebook, interconnectivity in real order. Look at Syria. Extraordinary turn of events. Even though you have, Russia and China are not in real terms with the United States to settle the score in UN Security Council, but eventually they have to understand people power is ultimate. Iran cannot sustain the current climate by its own autocratic substance. They have to necessarily come to terms with the change in leadership. It will happen, otherwise it will be forced, like Libya. Who could have imagined a year before, Arab Spring could have generated so much social empowerment? Look at Tunisia. Egypt, of course, still it needs to be resolved for stability. But it's evolving to be a fine roadmap. The road is bumpy, but eventually there's no better democracy than freedom. It will happen. Iran will come to terms. Yes, please.
Okay, hi, I'm Professor Brian Scott. I'm an economics professor here at Washington College. And I have a question with respect to China. How much money is flowing from China into that region, the Gulf State region? And if there's a great deal flowing in, how hard will America or Europe have to compete with China to get involved in those types of investment opportunities? Is there a lot of money flowing from China into that area?
It is. See, Chinese have realized, in addition to investing in US Treasury bills, they have to look at diversification. They have chosen Africa as the prime destination. They're also moving into Middle East with multiple investment partnerships and joint ventures. The Gulf states are also, with the change in market preference on account of the incremental growth, they are looking at China or Indonesia or India as an opportunity. In terms of investment flows, I've seen in the last 1 year, the Chinese investments in the Gulf states is not less than 15 to 18 billion in the Gulf states. In terms of investment partnership for oil and gas, in terms of construction engineering. So it's beginning to show some signs of direct inflow of investments to the Gulf from the Chinese. But a significant portion of the investments in the last 3 years have gone to Africa than Gulf. I think Gulf slowly is getting the benefit also of Chinese affluence. Yes, please.
My name is Andrew. You were talking about the European Union collapsing on their monetary system. You said that Qatar and the other Gulf states help for the United States. Do you think that maybe the Gulf states could also potentially help out the European Union at all? Maybe help save out Greece and all the other foreign countries?
See, the Gulf states have learned lessons in the last 3 to 4 years. So if you look at the investment partnerships which the Gulf states have placed, especially like countries like United States, Citibank was invested by Abu Dhabi Investment Authority at $31 per share. You know what is Citi's price today? It's a huge diminution, not even 10%. Similarly, Merrill Lynch, Kuwait Investment Authority has placed $5 billion. They lost. There were similar experience for the Gulf sovereign fund holders in the Europe as well. Now, what the Gulf states are doing as on date is to put in hardcore investment partnership. Like, for example, Qatar Science and Technology Park has signed with the Department of Energy. Again, aviation sector, Boeing is supplying a maximum number of equipments to the Gulf states, whether it's Emirates or Qatar, they're buying. Healthcare, there's a huge investment partnership is evolving between Saudi Arabia and Greater Houston Partnership. So whether the Gulf states are going to rescue Greece or Italy or Spain, I doubt. If there is a good investment partnership, if it is a good combination to support their overall growth, local market growth, then I'm sure the Gulf states are looking at. Having said that, Qatar has invested in Volkswagen and Porsche, and Qatar has committed for $5 billion investment in Greece for LNG terminals. So it's a diversification strategy as well. But they're not going to throw the money like the past. Now they're very careful. They're doing their due diligence. And on the contrary, they invested in, as I said, in China. They invested in Agriculture Bank of China. Qatar Investment Authority has invested. So people have learned the lessons in terms of optimization, and they are looking at market where there are growth prospects and sustainability. Yes, please.
To follow up on Andrew's, I guess, an exclamation comes to this question. I'm Professor Michael Harvey, Business Management. Does Doha Bank have any exposure in Europe?
No. We don't have. The Europe, the situation is very precarious. The banks are, European banks are not being funded by even American banks. And the Gulf banks are very, very skeptical. Yeah, please.
Two questions. First has to do with Syria. We all read about the politics there and the violence, but what's less clear is the financial situation. How much longer do you think the Assad regime can stay in power before the financial squeeze really forces it to abdicate power or do something much more fundamental? And the second question has to do with Russia. The Russians are going to go to the polls, and they're probably going to validate Vladimir Putin for another 6 years. The country has all sorts of political questions. It is becoming more and more reliant on petrochemicals to really boost its growth. Do you feel bullish or bearish about the future of Russia?
I'm bearish about Russia. And first, let me answer to your Syria. So the regime change is inevitable. See, it's people power again. The mass killing which they have orchestrated was, it's a point of disbelief for any civilized society to accept this kind of nonsense. So there is an internal revolution already cropping up like Libya. It is a question of time. I think the global power will have its own nuances to get it done, but meanwhile, it's changing dynamics. Leave alone as I said, the Security Council resolution was defeated, vetoed by these two, but conceptually, I won't give more than a year. All these dynamics will redefine the regime. When it comes to Russia, my question is on transparency and governance. Even the corporate side, we had many instances in the past. Investment partnership by BP was withered away. And again, when it comes to anti-money laundering, there were no proper framework for global governance to accept it. And still there are parallel systems which drives the mafia money. When it comes to Vladimir Putin, aspiring for the leadership after 10 years is something which doesn't dictate the right kind of value system. So it's in my opinion, it's very jittery. It's not reliable. It is not acceptable for a well-governed society. I think it's a question of time. The new alignment will crop up. The birds of the feather flock together, same feather flock together, like Syria. I wouldn't use the word China. China still to be tested in terms of transparency or even political stability. With the change in face of the world, with technology driving the change, whether Twitter or Facebooks, we need to see some real reorganization in China as well in the years to come. So it's surprising that these two countries are supporting the current Syrian regime. That itself shows the character and commitment in terms of governance. Yep. Any questions from the ladies? Yes.
My name is Rita. I'm an international student from Morocco. I have in fact two questions. The first one, you mentioned Islamic banks. You said that they failed like the classic ones. Can you please explain why did they fail? And the second question is how does management information system participate in the development of the banking sector in the Gulf countries? such as Qatar?
See, I had the privilege of practicing both conventional bank as well as Islamic finance, Sharia-based finance. We used to run Doha Bank and Doha Islamic as integral part of overall Doha Bank branch network. Of course, it had a separate Sharia board, and Islamic banking is all about, as I said, equity financing as against debt financing. It's all driven by contractual obligations, what you call wakala. These are principle-centered partnerships where transparency is supposed to be well depicted. Again, the profitability or pricing margins is all well understood between the partners, and there is opportunity to bring in a profit as against interest in every single deal. But it is in an embryonic stage. It's only 30 years old. There are no sufficient knowledge base. There is no standardization in the Islamic banking as on date. So it's struggling a bit. When it comes to technology support, again, it's evolving. Even within the Arab world, there is nothing as pan-Arab Sharia. In Morocco, you may have a different set of Sharia. Within the Gulf itself, or Malaysian standards are different from Saudi Arabian standards. So we need to set in universal framework for Sharia-based finance. That needs to be the first priority. When it comes to long-term financing, it's an opportunity. When it comes to the contractual infrastructure creation, or the contract financing, there's a good model could be Sharia-based finance. But again, since there is no standardization, it is not working out to be the right model. So what we need to do, it's already evolving. Islamic Finance Board from Malaysia is now trying to standardize as much as possible a universal standard they're trying to bring in, so that when you do a transaction, it's all asset-backed. And again, when you issue debt paper like sukuk, it's all standardized, securitized in full scale. That's the need of the hour. When it comes to the second question, the management information system, let me understand. You asked a question for management information for Islamic finance or in general? See, the management information systems in the Gulf states are well governed, I should say, because you have expatriate quality professionals managing the banking operations. They're all technocrats. They know the subject, and again, the investments in terms of technology is also very liberal. And conceptually, the interpretation of the information is very scientific. We practice, if it is a financial institutions, Basel II, last 6-7 years. Banks are well capitalized. The informations which are disseminated are all very authentic. They're all accurate, reasonably accurate, I should say. The management information is second to none. Most of the global technology supports are all available in the Gulf states. So if you want to, I daily see the dashboard on a daily basis, the mission critical ratios I look at, lending ratio or liquidity ratio to run an enterprise, or profitability of deals. So we're all fairly well governed in terms of information. Yes, please, Ms. Leslie.
Just real quickly, if you give Syria a year, the current regime about a year, what's your prognostication for Iraq? Do you think it will become a viable democracy? which would be wonderful, or do you think it will deteriorate from its current situation?
See, the Arab Spring is a new phenomenon. It evolved like a volcano last year. Now, it's people power which drives the rest. And women participation in the governance, and again, now human rights, are all coming up. The road is bumpy, as I said, but it's going to happen. I mean, Iraq cannot go back in terms of, political frame other than being a democratic institution. There are divisions in real order. That's part and parcel of the frame. Even advanced economies, even developed democracies are going through stagnations. You know it. So the road is bumpy, but eventually they will get there. So we see social stability in place like Qatar. You have human rights. We have women participation in the governance. Our Highness Sheikha Musa is running the enterprise for education. So the chase is on. It is irreversible. World over, you'll find, I think even the crisis, as I said, it's people empowerment. Human dignity is what is reflection today. The crisis is a positive reflection in a way because it's socially driving the change. That's why you have consumer protection. That's why you have investment caps. That's why you have the rate cap. The model is evolving to be social change. So Iraq cannot go back in its direction. Yes. Yes, please.
Speak up.
So, with all of the economic issues, problems that the United States has, the technological, maybe being behind some other countries, how long can the United States sustain being a partner to this, a partner that or one partner that as opposed to another? When do we cross the line to not be the gold standard?
See, today, this century again belongs to the United States. I don't have any other theory. In terms of political governance or defense or military, US is supreme. In terms of economic empowerment, there's no second line. There's a long way to catch up. Even China is emerging. Again, politics and economics have to converge in real order, the rest of the world. India is the biggest democracy, but it is fragmented in multiple forms. So US will continue to be the strong leader in the current world, this century again. Now, what sort of alignment they need, what they're trying to do around the world in terms of political governance, leadership, is good. They're trying to bring the change, social respects and freedom. And that's a great vision for human dignity. And the Gulf states are embedded with this partnership. They can't reverse. You have huge affluence, but you need to make sure gross welfare to the mass. And US is the right partner. Look at the scale of the operations. What we are witnessing as a temporary disturbance in the United States cannot realign the partnership for Gulf states with someone else. There's no second strong force who can showcase the founding principles of freedom or constitutional alignment, can give enduring values to Gulf states other than the United States. These are very rich countries, and they are ensuring their individual sovereignty, as I said, through the United States. There was a social unrest in Bahrain last year. The naval base of US is in Bahrain. There was social unrest in Oman because of the reflection in Tunisia or Egypt. And again, when it comes to political governance, US played a big role. They moderated the frame and making sure that there is an absolute social order comes in. And that's why they kept a military base and a naval or army in the Gulf states. And it's a long-term value for the overall stability of the region. That will prevail. That will continue to prevail. See, the US Constitution is well-founded. And this is a new world order in a way. Let's not get defeated by a few debt issues. That's only temporary. US can, research in the coming days with this intellectual property, with this copyright, with this defense, with this so many, strength US has got in its framework. That will prevail long term, globally, regionally. Yes.
Mr. Seetharaman, I thought I detected a theme of American exceptionalism, confidence and optimism about America's future. You've given us an extraordinary tour of the world with great insights. I'm sure I'm not the only one here that is thinking, boy, would it be possible for him to help advise our endowment investments? This has been an extraordinary opportunity for our students, our faculty, all of our invited guests this evening. We hope that this is the first of many visits you'll pay to Chestertown and Washington College. I cannot think of a better speaker or a better topic to inaugurate the very first of our speaker series in leadership, and we're very grateful for you this evening. Please join me in thanking Mr. Seetharaman.